I'm here tonight to go over a process that we had gone through for these developments. This process, which I have a certain number of 10 steps basically, that traffic engineers go through in evaluating how development may impact a roadway system. And this is pretty generic. I mean, these wind up, no matter whether you're doing a commercial development, housing development, a warehouse, industrial, it could be a Dunkin' Donuts, it could be a movie theater, a mall, big shopping mall. It's pretty much the same steps. And each of them have, there are differences between each of those type of land uses, but the process is basically the same. And so I thank Pat for recommending this. This is a suggestion he made to the board. And I think it's probably worthwhile because many times the public doesn't understand necessarily what goes into producing traffic impact studies and environmental impact studies. Ken Worsted's here from Creighton Manning. He's representative for the town. He's a town traffic consultant. We also have Lance Gorney here from DOT. He was part of the review process that we've gone through and are still going through. And I'll get to that aspect after I go through this. We begin with study existing roadway networks. Now often what we'll do is we'll go out and physically videotape, take a photo log of the roadways that we're examining. We'll obtain, or at least order plans, record plans from an agency that's either the state, county, or town, whatever's available we get. Often there's not a lot available, or the records are very old and don't represent what's in the field today. We then determine what hours we think ought to be looked at, and more often than not, it's AM and PM peak hours. And we would then look at an interval. We wouldn't just look at 1 hour. We'd take maybe accounts for a 3 or 4 hour period, say from 6:30 to 9:30, and then 3:30 to 6:30. If it's a retail, we'll often do Saturday midday, because Saturday peaks wind up being around midday, whereas weekdays are usually AM and PM peak. So we try to capture that peak. And again, it depends on if it's a retail establishment, we will do a Saturday. We'll do AM, PM on a Saturday. Sometimes we won't include AM. For example, if it's a movie theater, we wouldn't include the AM hour because few movie theaters are open during that period. Likewise, if we were doing say a medical office, we would also do a Saturday because they do have Saturday visitation. So it really depends on the use, what hours we look at. We then collect the volumes. Now, there's a number of steps we do. Actually take traffic counts at the intersections that we feel need to be reviewed, and those are often discussed with the consultant and or with the state or agency, particularly in a DEIS situation. Often we get that cleared out so everybody's on the same page, we're not redoing stuff. So we get an idea of what locations should be looked at, and we identify the hours we're gonna look at as well. Those are taken, those are actual manual counts. We then also place machine counts on the roadways, and we do that for a number of reasons. One is we want to make sure that the counts that are recorded manually somewhat match the numbers that are taken by machines. And it's a check against each other. The machine counts also give us travel speeds. They'll tell us what the 85th percentile speed is, and that's a speed at which we use for sight distance calculations. Every driveway along Dolsontown Road or at any project, the state will, almost any agency will ask for, we gotta have a sight distance to make sure people can visually see to be able to maneuver in and out of the site. Again, it's left turns in, left and right turns out, rear end sight distance to make sure someone coming over a hill can see the person stopped in front of them. So the speeds are used for that as well. It also gives us speed classification. You know, what percent trucks are on the road. And also, with that, it will give us gaps in traffic. How many gaps? Gaps are the time between vehicles, the headways. So what will wind up happening is if you have enough gaps on a road, you'll be able to make a maneuver, say, at a stop controlled intersection, okay, where you don't have right-of-way dedicated by a traffic signal. So that will give you, or there are a sufficient number of gaps for people to be able to move in and out of a driveway or a cross street. Again, the classification, speed, and gaps. The fourth item is selecting a design year. Now, in the GEIS, which I'll get to in a little bit, that we went out 10 years from the base year 22, we went out to 2032. Most projects, in consultation with the developer and knowing how long sometimes these approval processes can take, the design year is rarely less than 2 years. Some can be, something like a Dunkin' Donuts might be a year, or a gas station might be a year. But when you have a larger development, warehousing or even a shopping mall, you may go out 5 years. From the time you get your data to the time you're projecting when the thing will be open and operational. You then look at, once you have that design year set, you gotta project your existing volumes to that year, and you gotta decide on what numbers you're gonna use. Okay, is it 1% a year, 2% a year, 0.5%? And that we go back to the records. We go back to counts that we've done, counts that other consultants have done for other projects in the area. We look at the state or the county record count data. The state data goes back 10, 15 years. And you can get a very good idea of what the growth is on a roadway. And every roadway may be a little bit different, but we try to take a look at what would be most appropriate to use in this particular case. So we decide on that growth rate. We apply that to the existing volume, and that will give you the projected traffic volume. Once you have that number, you then have to add in, on top of that, anything else that might be happening in the neighborhood. And so you'll ask the local agencies, what plans are in front of you? How far along are they? What are they? How many trips are they going to be generating? What's their expected completion date? So you'll work up numbers for each of those, or you obtain the reports that were done for each of those projects, and you'll extract from that their trip generation information and their distribution information. So we then take that and we apply that on top of the projected number, and that becomes your no-build value. Now, the whole concept of doing these studies to see if you have any kind of impact is to say, what is the condition going to be if I'm not here in a design year, and if I am here in the design year? So you're going to do your analysis based upon the existing, the no-build, and then the build. The trip generation for the project for which you're doing the work is then applied and distributed. Now those rates are taken generally from ITE publication, where for many you save hundreds of data points that you can apply that will give you a very good sense of how many trips per employee or trips per 1,000 square feet. And you use that to generate the number that your project will, traffic your project will generate and put on the road. So we use that. If we have a known entity, like a Starbucks, we can get data from Starbucks or from Chick-fil-A. Like we do a lot of Chick-fil-A's. We can get data right from Chick-fil-A. We'll try to compare it. We'll count a real Chick-fil-A and we'll get the number that they're generating, and if we can get 2 or 3 of them, we will, independent of what ITE manual may say for a fast food with drive-through. I think we all know Chick-fil-A is sort of a unique thing. It's a little bit different than just your average order. It's much different than McDonald's or
We don't have any here.
or Burger King.
No
Not
Chick-fil-A's. No Chick-fil-A's.
Not yet.
Never even been.
So you have this. You generate our traffic, and then we have to look at the distribution of that traffic. And again, the distribution is going to depend upon what the use is. If it's a housing complex, you're going to look for like work to home, where are the people working, where are they living. If it's office, it's sort of the reverse. You know, the office is here, the population center is over there, and you develop a distribution for those generated trips. And that, based upon that, you then combine those. Once you apply those rates, or those distributions and the rates, to the no build, you now wind up with your build volume, and that's the third level that you're looking at. That's what you're gonna compare everything to. Now, we do capacity analyses. Now, this is a publication that, it's called Synchro Analysis. Every agency, probably around the world, uses the ITE or Synchro, some form of highway capacity management software. And we use the latest, which is 2023 manual. And there's methodologies for intersections, signalized or unsignalized intersections. There's methodologies for looking at ramping, interstate ramps, entry and exit ramps, weaving, diverge, merge movements, which we have in the case down the block here. And we analyze these, and we wind up with an existing level of service, a no-build level of service, and a build level of service. And we compare those levels of service. And if we're starting out at, let's say, a level of service C, which is a pretty good level of service for a peak hour, and you wind up in the no build with a D, that's not so bad during the peak hour. But if you wind up with the same D in the build period, you say, okay, we've had minimal impact on that location, because if we weren't here, it would be a D regardless. So you're pretty well set. The difference is when that level of service changes. If you go from a D to an E, then you got to mitigate that, and you have to figure out how do I make that change? How do I improve the intersection? Well, there's different strategies. Some simple ones are you could just, maybe if it's a signalized intersection, you could just retime the signal. Maybe the signal timing hasn't been adjusted for the difference in the volumes and the patterns that have occurred. Maybe Lance can answer this. How often do you guys modify your timings before this new stuff?
So typically their timings are a couple ways. One, complaints from the public. Someone says, I was at the signal and it seemed like it took a long time, and every time I'm here, I'm always here in red. So we'll send a crew out there to take a look, to make sure the signal's operationally correct. And then two, we can take a look at the signal timing and then the traffic volumes, right? As there mostly been a north-south heavy traffic use, and now it's an east-west. So then you can, reduce your red time on one leg and increase your green time on another leg to try to balance out the traffic volumes that have shifted over time, right? Maybe you need to do a split phase where, okay, we need to stop traffic, let these lefts go through because there's so many people coming in this direction now. We need to have a left arrow, get them out of the way, and then you have your regular cycle. So it's usually based on, someone calling in to the Department of Transportation and saying, the signal, every time I'm here, it doesn't seem to be working properly. Then we send out a crew to go take a look, and then we'll look at the timing, and if it needs to be adjusted, we can adjust the timing.
Thanks. Often it might be equipment failure, a loop detector fails, or now they're using cameras, and they're pretty redundant now, so I think if one camera goes, there's a supplemental camera that will take over. But you can change the operation simply by changing timing if you need to. Other ways, you could provide turning lanes. In other words, you may have a heavy left turn volume at a signalized intersection that there's no turning lane, and just by providing the turning lane, getting that left turn traffic out of the through traffic improves the operation. So that's another method. You could have sight distance improvements at, say, an unsignalized intersection, where people are creep up because they're afraid because they really can't see. So maybe you have to improve the sight distance, and that will help the operation. If it's an unsignalized intersection, you do what we call a warrant study, and you take a look at the numbers of vehicles that are traveling on the approaches to the intersection. And there are a series of warrants. There's about 10 different warrants. Maybe there's more, but most of them are volume warrants. But there's ones for pedestrian. There's one for crash history. There's peak hour warrant, 4-hour warrants based on volume. So you can look at that, and maybe the intersection needs to have a signal installed, and that would alleviate the problem. If it was a level of service C unsignalized, and now it's a level of service F, unsignalized under the build, well, you want to go out and maybe do a warrant study after the thing is operating and see if it actually, meets the signal warrant. Now, once you've identified that, you identify, okay, where there are issues, where are they, what can we do to mitigate them? You start developing these type of plans. And I'd like to just, it's based on how much right-of-way is available. Can I do this? Can I really do what I want to do? In this particular instance, these property owners adjacent to Dolcestown Road are all dedicating land to the town. Otherwise, it couldn't be done. It's that simple. The plan over here, which I'll show you in a minute, that's along the state highway. There's sufficient right-of-way there to accomplish what we need to accomplish without needing any dedication. And that would be a lot more difficult because none of these developers are located adjacent to this system. So you'd have to negotiate with a neighbor to give you that land or to give the state that land, and that can be very expensive. So there are other developments, improvement plans that we can do. I see here on the board, you can go into mass transit. Does it make sense to have shuttles? If it's a housing development or an office development, does it make sense to have shuttles for patrons? There's traffic calming that's used a lot at four-way intersections where you might have had stop signs. If there's right-of-way, maybe you want to put a roundabout in. Those are really, really big now, and the state, I think, likes those because it doesn't mean you have to maintain a signal. They're also a lot safer than a four-way intersection. And then we always consider bicycle accommodation, pedestrian accommodations where it sort of makes sense. There are some towns now that have master plans that want to have a sort of a complete streets thing where they want to have sidewalks and make it very accessible for people to walk. And most towns that have adopted master plans to do that. So we look at that and see if that is something that should be considered. For this corridor, for this section of roadway, we started with 1081, which is over here.
Pete, this is Dolcestown Road?
Yes.
Let folks know what we're looking
Yeah,
at.
this is Dalton. 17M is over here. James P. Kelly Way is there. This is Dolcestown. McVeigh is over here. 1081 was a project that we started in, I think it was 2020. And it's I think under construction now, Isaac, is that correct? And the improvements for this intersection related only to that project have been permitted. And they'll probably start construction. There's not a lot. They gotta improve the shoulder, move some guide rail, improve the curb radius there, and modify the signal slightly. That work has been permitted, so that can commence at almost any time. Subsequent to that, our firm was also employed by the former owner of the Simon parcel, which is now RDR Sun. And then Morangi came, and then the planning board said, wait a minute, we have to look at these things collectively. There's a lot going on here, and for someone to do one report for each of these, our firm wouldn't mind doing that, but it's just a whole lot easier saying, okay, what's happening? Let's look at all of these projects collectively. So the town decided to go through the generic environmental impact avenue and to look at all these different projects. They each have they're all warehouses. Now I want to mention that where I mentioned the trip generation earlier, and the publication for which we refer to determine what traffic can be generated by each use. The state, we would normally use a warehouse because that's what they are. But the state likes to have a little bit of a cushion, and they wanted us to use a higher rate. Our rate was almost double what a normal warehouse rate would be. So you're being very conservative in what we're estimating because, I mean, some of these look like regular warehouses. You know, they're a couple 100,000 square feet, but some are only 30,000 square feet. But we treated them all the same. Every single one of these were applied with the same rate. And then this way, if one of them changed, or if they had two different kinds of tenants, it would still work. So we wound up using the higher rate. In terms of, I mentioned earlier that we went to 2032, we went 10 years out, because all this isn't gonna be necessarily be built within 1 year. It could be built over 5 or 8 years. And we wanted to project far enough out when you could expect these to be completed. We also added to that other projects. We added what is called Slate Hill Commerce Center down on Route 6. We added in, well, the Dunkin' Donuts, which is there, Wingate Hotel, Middletown Commons expansion, Disso Burger, mixed use, mixed use project, Slatewood Apartments, and the car wash expansion. Those are all added to the background. So those other projects have all been included in this. And we also projected the numbers all the way to the existing to the no build to 2032. Some could argue that this work is actually the growth. You know, Arden, Slate Hill, and the Duncan, and the Middletown Commons, those projects could be considered as the growth. But besides adding them independently, we then added growth on top of that. So we put the generic study together, and we submitted it. The town had their staff, their traffic staff, and the state, because the state is considered an involved agency, because everyone goes on to 17M. And we got comments on what was called the draft generic environmental impact statement. And with that, we then considered, look at their comments. One of the comments was, Creighton Manning, Ken's group wanted to say, okay, let's do some sensitivity analysis. Let's multiply the trip rate by 1.5 times, on top of the fact that we almost doubled what a normal warehouse would be. So we provide that data to them, and they review that, and they were obviously satisfied with the conclusions.
What rate did you apply?
1.5 times.
But what was the original?
The original rate was a light industry rate.
But how many? But
Oh, it's about a half a trip per 1,000 square feet. It's like 0.44 trips per 1,000 square feet.
And so they went 1.5 times that.
Right. Now, the normal warehouse is like 0.25 trips per 1,000 square feet. So again, it's a very conservative approach. So
Is that in a 24-hour period, or is that within a shift period?
That's a peak hour rate.
Oh, so that's just for 1 hour?
Yes, that's how.
So we would multiply that rate by 24?
No, because it doesn't generate the same amount every hour. That is the peak hour of the generator. I might make that distinction. The Institute of Transportation Engineers has 2 different rates. They have a peak hour generator, and then they have the peak hour of adjacent street traffic. Now, we use as our base numbers the peak hour of adjacent street traffic, but then we add onto that the peak hour of generator that may occur 3 hours before or 3 hours after. So we're really layering the peak of the generator on top of the peak of the highway.
But you only put 2 hours for
Yeah, every traffic study will, they'll look at the peak hour, AM peak hour, PM peak hour. We'll look at an interval. We'll look at from 6:30 to 8:30 or 9:30. Within that band, we'll identify the peak hour of adjacent street traffic. Same with the PM. If it were Saturday, it would run probably from 10:30 to 2. And then we'd wind up always finding it's like 12:30 to 1:30 or 12 to 1. So all the analysis is done on the peak hour.
So to help illustrate what he's talking about, peak hour is the highest generation of traffic you're going to encounter. So from those hours, when you keep adding on, because we were very conservative with these projects and asked for, we want to be conservative to 1.5 times the amount. So the amount of traffic that's coming in at those peak hours is the highest traffic level you're going to get. Now you build to mitigate for that level. So we're saying you got this much of an impact of traffic, you built to that, but most of the time, your traffic's here.
You have a report on this?
Oh, we have traffic studies, yes.
From
yes.
the, how come when I foil the DOT, they won't give me the information?
And we have the traffic study that Collier's provided.
No, where is the DOT, state DOT traffic study?
No, okay, so that's not our, Collier's was the hired engineer to do the work. They provide the traffic study, we review the traffic study. We do not create our own traffic study for private development. That is what the engineering firm is hired for. We review it and make comment to be sure that it's correct.
So where are the comments on this?
Oh, there's,
Yeah.
I mean, I foiled and I'm not getting
All
them.
right, well,
And no one can get them.
Yeah, I filed it
I don't
for
think we
too.
can answer that tonight.
yeah, I don't know.
Well,
about that.
probably not. But, and I'm certainly not gonna answer it, because I don't know the answer.
Okay, well, he's.
Right, but we don't have a traffic study, so maybe, so how, depending on how the FOIL was requested, if you tell me, where's the Department of Transportation traffic study, I'll say, we don't have one,
It doesn't exist.
because it doesn't exist.
Please provide us the Collier, is that the name?
The
Collier
engineering,
traffic study that
Or
you
the traffic study-
evaluated for this
yeah,
project.
the
the
engineering
results.
consultant traffic
Results.
study for the project, that we should
They're
have.
playing name games with it.
Well, you know, I don't do the FOILs, but I know if it comes in and says,
But
we
you're-
want your
you-
traffic study, I'm gonna, if I'm the FOIL person, I'm gonna say, I don't have one.
So
But if you ask for the engineering traffic study from the consultant,
And the resulting comments from the DOT,
that,
then you'll get the package.
then you'll get the package, right?
Lance, what is your last name?
Gorney?
Gorney?
Now, I don't work in the Poughkeepsie office, but I did work
Very
with
familiar with
Pete
this project.
with this project, so that's why I'm here.
Why isn't someone from the Poughkeepsie region here?
No one would know it better than Lance.
I was in on this project for a long time.
Was the Poughkeepsie Regional Office made aware that you're gonna be here tonight?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And who authorized you to be here?
Let's
We're
get back on
getting
track.
off
Yeah.
Let's get back on track.
Yeah.
Um, So that's how these developed. The Dolsontown Road corridor wound up devising, using a three-lane section for the entire length along all the frontages. That allows left turns, trucks, and passenger cars to get out of the through traffic stream, and helps the traffic flow much more smoothly through the area. All the intersections will be stop control. The intersection of
What controlled?
stop sign control,
Stop sign, not light.
not lights, no signals. The intersection of 17M, there'll be an additional lane on the westbound approach for that section of roadway. Yeah, I don't know if it's as discernible to you, but you can see the yellow section shows the widening that is going to occur along both sides of Dolsontown Road. And as I mentioned earlier, land was dedicated or is being dedicated by each of these adjacent parcels to effectuate these improvements. We have here, again, Dolsontown Road is here on this diagram, James P. Kelly Way. You have Route 6 and the I-84 ramp. These improvements were developed subsequent to the GEIS. We then had, and we had the Slate Hill Commerce Center, we then had two other developers came in, which was RDM on County Route 56, it's 310 County Route 56 project there, and then Project Liberty, which is sharing the access with the Slate Hill Commerce Center, came in also. So studies were done for each of those projects independently, and subsequent to that, the Route 6 logistics project came in. And the process that we used for logistics was exactly what we used in the GEIS. We took the studies before, the trip generation from all those other projects, added that on, grew it to the design year of, in this case, 2026, redid the analysis, and developed mitigation. What is shown on this drawing is all the mitigation we're adding. We're extending the left turn lane from 17M northbound to 6. we're extending the existing one back to the ramp. We're adding a second double left turn, a second left turn lane. On the 6 approach, we're adding a left turn lane, so you're gonna have a left, a through and a left, and you'll maintain the channelized right. The slotted right here is gonna be eliminated because we were concerned, actually the state was concerned with the double left turn traffic, and if we left this as a free right turn movement, there could be an issue with potential collisions at this point. Approaching Dolsontown Road, we added, again, a second double left turn lane. We had a widened James P. Kelly Way for a 2-lane receiver. We actually did the same thing on 6 here, so we have 2 15-foot wide lanes receiving the left turns. And these were, again, we do movements for trucks. We make sure that trucks can actually make these turning movements at each of these locations. We also realigned the James P. Kelly Way approach at this location to align with the through eastbound traffic on Dolsontown Road. And of course, this double left turn widening here forces us to widen 17M southbound for a proper alignment. There'll be a new traffic signal here, a new traffic signal here. We're widening also the ramp coming off of I-84 for a 2-lane approach, and that's going to be signalized. Right now, I know even to this day that people queue out on that, almost down to the main line. So that will alleviate that. These signals will be interconnected so that we can ensure that there will be a proper progression of traffic along this corridor. So you're gonna have a signal here, one here, and a third here.
Can I just ask for a clarification? That right turn on Route 6, so people will no longer be able to just take that
Right.
right?
Correct.
They're gonna have to wait at a light there?
Correct.
He said coming onto 6, I believe.
Yeah.
Not leaving 6. Oh.
Yeah, coming on to 6 from 17M.
Yes,
Correct.
that's right.
And going off the 6 on the 17M, that's,
This stays.
That stays.
That one
that
stays.
stays.
Sir, are you gonna propose reducing the speed limit on Dolsontown Road? It's currently at 45 miles an hour.
I have recommended that since I did 1081.
Okay.
And I was told this town asked the state, and the state said, let's wait and see.
Okay.
It's our preference that it would, I think it will, with the traffic level and the number of, there's a relationship between mobility and access. The higher mobility, the less access you have, the more access you have, your mobility goes down. And so what's gonna happen is, once you have these numbers of access points, chances are speeds are gonna naturally slow down. And at that point, if the town wants us to, we do a speed study and present our case to the state. The state has control over that, the town doesn't.
And if I may, sir, just to add to that, it's that it's a town road, but the state is the one that has to say if the speed limit can get raised or reduced. And they do not act preemptively, they only respond to traffic conditions that we take. So if the traffic increases, it could be a better case, it's probably certainly will.
Thank you.
Now, again, this is all cumulative. We've layered development on development on development. We have approximately 10 developments involved in this mitigation. And there'll be a developer's agreement deciding who's gonna pay what and when, and I don't know how that works. I don't even think the chairman does. It's up to the town, really. It's not up to the planning board. But that's what's gonna happen. So these measures will cover everything that all these developments on Dolsontown Road, as well as the logistics, Route 6 logistics, the Slade Hill Commerce Center, the Project Liberty, and the RDN, County Route 66. For those developments, for the Slade Hill, they'll be signalizing their driveway. There'll be a new driveway here off of 6.
Where
Where
is
are we
it?
on that?
This is, County Route 59 is right here.
56.
56.
56 is right here. All right, just, it's a couple thousand feet to the west is Hoops Road is down over here. That was the original location for this project. when it started. And the planning board was insistent on, we don't want it there, we want you to move it up the hill. We think it's a better location. We have a sort of a link, internal link, that the Project Liberty project and the Slate Hill Commerce Center will share the driveway. It will be signalized. So there'll be a separate right turn lane into that driveway and a separate left turn lane into that driveway, and it will be signalized. County Route 56, there's an RDM project there. They have a couple of driveways there. There's a county road. They will have left turns into each of these driveways and a left turn into the block road. This intersection will be signalized. It will be geometrically improved to allow trucks to make this turn. And this will be, the intersection will be tightened up and the signal placed at this location. The Route 6 logistics will have 2 points of access, one for passenger cars, the other for trucks. This will have a separate right turn lane into the truck entry, because most of the truck traffic is coming from the east. And there'll be a separate left turn lane into this driveway for passenger vehicles.
How are you're gonna add more lanes on Route 6?
Well, there'll be turning lanes, yes.
So how many are you gonna add?
Just one, a left turn lane at this location and a separate right turn lane at this location. At this location, a separate right turn lane and a separate left turn lane.
And
And
on
can
Route,
I ask, sorry, on Route 6, over here, because I live in the Southgate Apartments, so we can get there from James P. Kelly, Route 6, by Kirbytown, there's the car dealership and another apartment complex, so there's a little bit higher traffic to the apartment complexes around, but no signals being added at those spots.
No, what's gonna happen, there are a number of locations where we've determined that they need to be evaluated post-development. In other words, the planning board is it's gonna be a condition that they go back out after, and actually it was a condition in each of the reports that we did for Slate Hill, for Project Liberty, and for Route 6 Logistics. For each of those, we have a monitoring program saying that should be included as part of the mitigation. So the planning board will insist, I'm sure, that as these progress, you go back out, you redo a count, you do before and after. If it needs a signal, the signal will have to be installed. I suspect that won't be the case because, as I said, we've been very conservative with our trip generation and our growth, I just don't think that that's going to happen. But the condition will be there to investigate it.
Why was there not a signal between Kirbytown Road and Route 6 proposed?
It's not warranted.
There's been a lot of accidents there.
Well, we have, I might mention that as part of traffic studies, often, particularly the state insists on accident review. We collected all the accident data along there, and it didn't meet the threshold of what they call a priority investigation location. If it had, we would have had to put a report together and to develop mitigation for that cost.
just to clarify, the 10 projects together are paying for all of these improvements?
Yes, we did a quick estimate, it's over $10 million.
That's it?
That's it, yeah, it's low.
That doesn't seem like a lot.
Are all those signals synchronized or are they
Yeah, they will be.
independent?
The only one that will, can be is the one up at Abe Isaacs, that's a city signal. And I don't know what your relationship, Lance, with them is. If you were willing to do it, they'll let you do it. I mean, I don't know what if they would coordinate that. But the idea is you'd like to have that coordinated, so the whole 17M corridor is coordinated. The intent is for at least the 3 that I mentioned here to be coordinated.
Well, the city's replacing all the traffic lights in every intersection and they are synchronized, so it may be something that can interface
Yeah,
with
we've
what
been
you're
in
doing.
touch with the city for some other issues in terms of utilities along that section, because the corporate boundary is kind of weird in this area. It sort of mixes, it goes back and forth, so you don't, just looking at it, you don't really know where the city begins and the town begins.
Could you go over the exit off of 84 on the Route 6?
Yeah. This, right now, the queue on here in the peak hour in the afternoon is, goes almost back to the state highway. we're gonna double this up, we're gonna have 2 lanes exiting, okay? And they'll be able to, if they're gonna go left, they'll be, there's a sign on here that's gonna direct people that wanna go to 6 to be in the left lane. And that will be signalized, so there'll be a dedicated green time for them to go unopposed. There'll also be a force-off detector down the ramp, so that if the queue does back up, it will switch the signal, the 2 signals will be this one and then the one at 6, to green to allow that queue to dissipate.
So can I ask you a question? So if you put a signal there, do the studies show that it frees traffic or it backs it up? Because I'm guessing if a signal is there, it's a red light, people are gonna get backed up even more if they're already getting backed up now when there's no signal
So
there.
the analysis, indicates that it won't.
There's
In fact,
also, there's a signal on 17M as well,
Yeah.
to stop traffic so that you can clear and get onto 17M.
Yeah, in other words, there'll be a signal stopping these
Right.
people when these people get the green.
But already, and I worked in Newark for a lot of years, coming back home, you couldn't even get to the exit off of 84. You were 30 cars back to the exit,
Yeah,
Still up.
and that's without 1,000 trucks being added.
right.
Mhm.
Well, this considers all of that traffic included in this, so that this mitigates the increase in that volume, in those volumes.
To take it back to the beginning,
Sorry.
when you did your study or your counting of the traffic flow, can you tell me what time period that encompassed?
You mean year-wise?
Yeah.
Yeah, we look back, we do it 2022, but we look back to, we didn't do it during COVID.
Okay,
You know,
'cause I was gonna
there's-
say there need to be a
No.
major adjustment.
Yeah,
I
no.
wanna ask because it does say, I looked at the traffic study players did, and it was during COVID. So it was during, part of the time frame was during. when
What
people
time
were
frame
working
did you
from
use?
home.
No, we look at counts that were conducted by our firm as well as other firms in 2019, before COVID. We did not do any counts during COVID, although the state did give us a COVID protocol for what you do during counts. And we adjusted where we thought we needed to. In other words, the state said, okay, if you counted within 5 years of COVID, you can just adjust those volumes to, say, 2022 conditions. We actually did counts in 2022. And we also looked at the 2019 counts that were done. And we compared those to make sure that those were within the realm, if you will. They're never gonna be exact. You're never gonna get 2 days, you're not gonna get the same count, but they gotta be.
You need to account for COVID and you need to account for the residential growth in the area as well. So there's been massive residential growth.
Right, so we actually did a recent count at Dolsontown in 17M, and the volumes were lower than what we used as existing counts in our report.
And
we
where's
do
that
we do
study?
that, pardon me?
Where's that study? Where's that
There's
report?
not a study, it was just one count that we did for our own information. We do counts like that occasionally we'll put a hose out, we'll do 24-hour counts on a roadway system to see exactly what's happening.
Okay.
To verify, our numbers. So, again, all these improvements that are shown here are done to mitigate the impact associated with all the developments that I've mentioned. And that were included in the generic study, as well as each of the Slade Hill Commerce Center, County Route 56, Project Liberty, and Route 6 Logistics.
All right, so just to go on that, so when this all started, there were only a few projects that were slated to come before the board. So those came in, we looked at that and said, well, what else is going on? And then there were rumors, well, we could have this one, this one, this one. So at the state level, we said we want all the development that's going to take place so that we can look at what the proper mitigation is if all this gets built. So we did not piecemeal and say, let's only look at this location and let's only mitigate for that one logistics, center. We required them to put together a comprehensive traffic study, include all the development, Dolsontown Road, Route 6, 17M, where is that traffic coming from? We even had them add more, we had them use the high cube rate, which is a higher warehouse rate. So we stacked these numbers as high as you can go. The likelihood of hitting these numbers, we don't know. We're only data driven, right? So we require them to include all of this. So when we take all that and then we do this modification to the roadway by adding lanes, adjusting the signal timing, adding a stop control, adding lanes on the ramp. This all gets put into models, and we run these models. It's a synchro model, and it can show you whether you're at least maintaining the level of service, or you're improving the level of service, or do you need to add more? When we first started, there was only one lane on that ramp. When we ran the models, we said, this isn't gonna work. You need another lane. So they added another lane. When you add that other lane with that additional capacity, and you put this in the models and you run it, the traffic did not back up to even where it does today. It did not go that far back. So by adding lanes, adding traffic control, and when you run these models, this is why we required Colliers to give us the proper information so that we could do the proper analysis and then go forward. So this wasn't done in a vacuum. This wasn't done like, let's just look at only this one warehouse. This was done with what is being developed in this whole corridor, because this whole corridor is gonna be affected.
Excuse me. You're saying warehouses, these are distribution
Or
centers.
distribution centers.
Well, there's a different number for warehouses and distribution
Well,
centers.
and that's why we asked for the higher number.
Is this the higher number on warehouses or higher number
No,
on
it's
distribution?
the higher number.
Right.
These are
Yes.
numbers for distribution centers?
They're
The
high cube.
numbers.
What is high Q means what?
So a regular warehouse, you'd have a truck come in and sit there all day. They pack up the goods and stuff like that, so they're not going in and out. But the high cube, you have the smaller trucks, they come in, they get filled, they go, right? So it's a higher turnover rate of vehicles coming and going to that distribution center. So your standard warehouse, you're gonna have a huge semi come in and park there for hours, right?
Right.
High cube, they're coming in and they're gone in like a half hour or whatever. So those were the rates that we required them to use, not the lower rate. Because they could say, we're just gonna do a low warehouse, regular warehouse, but then before it gets built, you realize, hey, let's transform this into a high cube, so that's why we required the high cube. We wanted the highest level of traffic impact, and then that's what we reviewed, and then those were the models that we used. And it's up to the engineering team, for Pete and Colliers, to come back with those designs for us to review, run the models and say, will this work, will it not work? And so it wasn't done in a vacuum. It wasn't just, oh, let's just look at this warehouse on 6. It was, where are all these developments coming in? Where's that traffic going? Let's model it, let's see what happens. And that's how we came up with these plans. Or they provided the plans, but we provide the review comments and do the quality analysis.
And we're at a state now where the actual design documents, the permit documents, are before the town. Ken's firm is reviewing Dolson Town for the town. And the design documents are up at the regional office, Poughkeepsie, to review the design for 6 and 17
Okay.
right now, and the signal plans as well.
Did you know, there's warehouses going down 17 all the way down to Goshen.
Yes,
How was that accounted for?
that's in the
That,
GEIS.
so 17, no, but that one is under a separate, I understand that's gonna be under a separate EIS,
So,
GEIS.
so.
But you didn't include it in this model.
No,
Yeah.
because this happened before that was even,
Right. So
Right.
are you aware of that or not? You know, there's a lot of trucks gonna be coming up 17 from the manufacturing down there up here to warehousing. Did you know that?
That, I worked on the segment that Pete worked on with adding Dolson Town and then the 6. And if there's new ones coming on board,
They're under construction, they're almost completed.
Well, not under construction.
no, they can't be under construction.
Not under construction.
didn't-
He would know about it. if
Yeah,
they were
they're-
under construction.
And you didn't,
One on 17M is,
Down in Goshen they are.
It's in Goshen also.
yeah, well, it still impacts 17 because one of the warehouses that they're gonna be storing stuff on, that manufacturing down there and bringing it up here is right here.
On 17.
It's on
not to
17.
mention the passenger vehicles that would be going to that site, because the only grocery store, the only food resources are in past Dolson Road. So
But-
people are gonna have to come down 17M.
But you're assuming that it isn't being.
We're not
looked into.
assuming anything.
No, you're assuming it's not gonna be looked into, that it's not being studied.
Well,
You
You're
just said
making
it's
that
not part of
assumption.
this study.
You said it's not part of this
this,
stuff.
because this study preceded that development.
Okay, so everything's changed.
No, Nothing's changed. All this mitigation addresses the projects that are in front of you. If the other project causes an issue here, they have to mitigate, add on to this mitigation. Don't you understand it? It's a progressive process. It's not all at once and I have to consider.
Well, the state has to look at what happens.
Well, they would have to submit to
They
us.
will.
Yeah, okay. Now, the other thing is, Orange County Community College is not included in the study. This was done while they were not in session. There's a lot of traffic commuter traffic for that. That wasn't done. There was no mention of the state DOT, service center that's on Route 6, access on and off. That wasn't
highway
in the
service.
study. That's not in the study. You need those guys to plow the roads. There's no access to that. There's no mention of all the extra, housing that occurred in Wapkill that uses Dulcet Town Road for those residents. That has increased in the last 2 years, and those weren't in the study.
We had to disown,
There's nothing in Middletown or Wapkill.
we had two residential projects are in the generic study that we were I understand where you're coming from, but you have to understand that when these things are done, they're done at a moment in time that considers everything that's in front of the board. All right, the board is not gonna consider something that's not in front of them or not in front of someone else. Okay, if that comes in 3 months later, well, that development has to then consider how they're gonna impact this roadway as well, if they are. They have to look at their distribution, they may say, no, we're not coming this way. Traffic's not going here, they're all going to 17 and then get up to 84. They may not come across 17.
So you're sucking up all the roadways for your
Well,
own
well, I
side,
have to
and
say
not
this,
leaving nothing
just
for
to
anybody
give
else.
you an example, the number of vehicles going through 6 and 17, Dulcet Town Road and 17M intersection by the other developments that we considered in the generic study is higher than the trips that are being generated by these developments, by all of these developments. Now, you may find it hard to believe, but that's what the numbers show.
We live here.
You can't even.
We live here. Try to get through there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon
Yeah, I
until
understand,
5.
ma'am, because it shows that as existing, the left turn from 17M to James P. Kellaway is, I think, at a level of service F. Today, we're gonna improve it.
Using all the capacity. Now, this Dulcet Town Road is a town road,
That's correct.
and the town code says that access for a warehouse above a certain size has to be to a direct access to a state or county road.
Well, this says direct access to the state.
It doesn't currently say that, that's proposed. There's some zoning changes before the town board right now proposing that.
It should have said that, but. What,
Can you
that's
explain
not in
that?
effect now? That's what I read as your current code.
And these go back years, and they gotta apply by the rules that were back then, not the new ones.
Right.
Is there anything else you wanted to address in your presentation, Pete? Because
No,
I think
we're done.
public does have additional questions and comments, and I think so that those comments are part of the
Record.
official record when the stenographer is here.
Right.
They should be made a part of the
Yeah,
public
no,
hearing.
what I wanted to do is just give you a brief outline of how these studies are done, what measures or what elements are make them up, how they were applied in not only the generic case, but how they were applied to all these other developments along 6, the mitigation that came out of the review process, the town review and actually the county review as well as the state review process. This represents what needs to be done.
Before you leave, can you just touch on whether your modeling looked at the 6 and 284 intersection?
Yes, and it's subject to future evaluation for signal installation. The right-of-way down there is very narrow, so I don't think any widening can occur there, but yes, it is slated for monitoring.
So,
Thank you.
One more question. So you did say that all you guys did, that it would work, right?
Yes.
Based on who? You or the DOT?
No, the DOT has to review all this.
Oh, yeah.
This would not happen if they said it won't work.
All right, so we run the models through the Synchro model software application, right? And you put in all the data that's going to be part of that roadway system, That's all kinds of, you know, widths, lengths, geometrics of the roadway, the volume of the roadway, and you have these computer software models that you load the data in there, and then you run them, and then it will come back and tell you what level of service you have, how well that operates, and what changes you may need to make. And that's what we run.
But you're using data from the applicant, not the town's engineer.
Yeah, but that's correct, because we're the ones producing the report. But again, they're reviewing the numbers as well, and they're looking at the numbers and saying, do the numbers make sense? Yes or no? In fact, Ken actually in one of his reviews asked us to change the distribution of the passenger cars to see if that made a difference as a sensitivity analysis. And we did that, and we showed that it didn't really impact the results at all.
So, but just to confirm that if the data is wrong, I'm just not saying it's wrong. If it's wrong, it would speed up that it's correct and it's not correct, right?
Well, like anything, if data is not
If
correct,
data is not
it's
correct,
gonna be
exactly.
correct, right?
So this is their data, not your data.
So,
But
yeah, they already
We
said.
do it based off of manuals that are used at the engineering professional level, the ITE manuals, and they run thousands and thousands of points of data to tell developers, depending on what land use code you have, these are the trips that are generated by the size of your development, right?
Yes.
So those are the numbers that everyone uses. You have a base of something to come up with
Absolutely,
a number,
yeah.
right? So we use those published manuals to ensure that those are the numbers that are being provided to us. And that's why when I went into the high cube, those numbers are higher, and that's why we asked for them. So, like Pete said earlier, like a Dunkin' Donuts, you can go find Dunkin' Donuts land use code, and it'll give you the number of expected trips during the AM, PM peak hours, and the size of the Dunkin' Donuts, and whether it's a drive-through or not. If it's a drive-through, there's more volume. So there are published engineering manuals that are used at the professional level to make sure that the numbers provided meet those guidelines.
And just to be clear, you modeled for 1,000 trucks per day.
What we model, whatever
Whatever.
it said.
Whatever it is.
So-
Actually, it's more.
Yeah, it depends on the use.
I just
So
wanted to ask,
my
could
last-
you
my last
share the
comment on that.
timeline for these developments? The
You mean when they're gonna
timeline
be
for these
built?
developments?
When they're gonna be built, that I
Yeah.
have no idea. We assume that from the day that they send in an application, that they would be 2 years down the road. For the generic study, all of these, we went 10 years down the road.
So, question on data. So, does the New York's DOT, if another engineer, in this case CDM, challenged their data and how they came up with these studies, do you guys put that into consideration?
Who challenged?
Just say another company.
Another company comes and says, hey, this is not gonna work. This is an engineer from God knows where.
They would have to provide their data, their information, and we would have to look at, is it a truthful study that's before us or not? They would have to be using the same manuals that we're using. So I would find it strange to say, someone's going to come in and say, oh, you should be using 50 trips. And we say, well, where are you getting that information from? If they point to the manual, we should have the same number. So we're using the same manuals to determine how many trips are generated. So if another company comes in, I want to see what manuals are you using?
It's not the manuals. All I'm saying is that the data that the applicant provides, if somebody else is challenging that data, because that data is what's being used to justify this project, is wrong, then does the DOT
We're
question
talking
that?
about just traffic study data.
Well, they had, in this particular case, the state also had a consultant engineer review the reports as well. And it was a separate private firm.
What's the name of the firm?
Was it Baker?
So
Michael Baker.
Michael
The
Baker.
state had that done.
We had an independent consultant firm review it as well.
Thank you.
And the state paid for that?
We have a contract with consultants that we use independently to assist in reviews.
Sorry, one last question. Are you reducing the speed